Let's start. My name is Fabrizio. I'm a kind of old PHP developer since 1999, another century. I do freelance work, and I am a full-time Magento developer. If anybody of you know Magento, it's an e-commerce platform. I do that since 2011. And I've always loved participating in the open source work. So I've always been involved in many different open source projects. And yeah, I now lately created my own version of Magento, which is called Majo, but that's a whole another topic. So what are we going to do today? We will talk about AI in PHP at a PHP conference. So let's start with Python. I mean, it's kind of like a silly joke. And by the way, if you don't know what this meme is about, you have to search on the internet for IT Crowd, because for us nerds, it's the best TV shows ever made. No, but seriously, why I want to start with Python? Because in Python, regarding AI, there's a plethora of tools, and these are just like a few of the tools that you can find by a simple Google search. And so why is that? It's mainly, I think, it's a historical reason, meaning that many of the stuff that regards AI, everybody's starting doing that thing, those things in Python. Also because Python has a lot of very good mathematical libraries, which is what's being used to create the models and this kind of stuff. So that's mainly an historical reason. But how it usually goes, and PHP is really great about that, we are catching up. And what I found out in my experience in this topic is that, at least from my perspective, the tools that I found in PHP are so much simpler. Sometimes, obviously, you may need the complexity, depending on the tasks you have to develop. But sometimes you just need the easy stuff. And again, PHP is great with that. And also, we have to think, by the way, this is the mandatory meme of every presentation ever. So the problem is, yes, you can tell me, then why we just don't use like a Python software or whatever, or framework. Because it's not really easy to switch to a completely new infrastructure. For example, if your company does only PHP. So because maybe you will need, that's for sure, you will need other developers. You will need probably also some other DevOps or sysadmin. And so, you know, it's not that simple. So if it is possible, it could be nice to stick in the same stack that you are used to. And here we are. Here comes the LLPhant. So LLPhant is it's a PHP framework for doing generative AI stuff. It was created by Maxime Townsend, which he has this company which is called Theodo. I'm not related to them in any way. I just use this framework. I think it's great. It has a lot of potential. It's growing. It's very new. It's just started like not even a couple of years ago. But the interest is growing. It reached 1,000 stars on GitHub, which is not like the definitive metric for anything, but it gives you an idea. And it still continues to grow lately. And it's MIT license, meaning it's a very permissive license. You can use it in commercial environments or not commercial, obviously. And it was inspired by I'm sorry, I'm kind of in the front of the stuff. It was inspired by two very famous Python projects that are LangChain and LlamaIndex. But it changed during time, so I wouldn't define it only that way. So the thing is, why do we even need some sort of framework for doing that? And why do I say that? Because in PHP, like in any other programming languages, we have some clients for connecting to stuff. So what do I mean by that? We have a PHP client for OpenAI, meaning that we just instance it, and then it asks stuff to OpenAI. or we have a client for Mistral, we have a client for Anthropic. So why do we need another tool? Well, the thing is, the AI world is changing very quickly, and obviously every client, meaning the client that connects to the platform, it's coded in a different way, because maybe the platform itself has some requirements that are different from another platform. The coder is another person, so every time all of the clients are different. And because the AI world is changing so quickly, you may want to use a platform today, but in 6 months, maybe you want to switch to another one. And this is by customer requirements, you know. So as a developer, you don't really have a voice in that. Maybe they will tell you, and this happened to me multiple times during the development of this project. They will tell you, oh, yeah, but I want to have a test with a platform X. And it's like, if you don't have a generic abstracted way of connecting to the services, you are kind of screwed. So it is nice to have a way to do that. And another thing that's worth considering is that you may be able to mix and match, meaning that maybe a platform does something that's very good for you, but another one is doing another thing that you also need that's very good, and the other one doesn't do that well. So if you have a framework that again, abstracts everything, you can ask something to one platform and something to another in a quick and cohesive way without, you know, having specialized code in it. So that's my take on the topic. Okay, so let's see what the fuzz is about, meaning let's start to dive into the features and the code. So again, as I was telling you before, in my opinion, a lot of things in PHP are really easy. And the thing is, what we are seeing here in these few lines of code, how do you even start doing this kind of work with this framework? Well, you have mainly two classes or two objects, the configuration class and then the chat class, and we will talk about that a little bit later. So you just instantiate the configuration class, which is, we have two different classes, but I'm working at unifying the configuration system. You instantiate the configuration class, you pass like a couple of things, the API key, which language model you want to use, and then you instantiate the chat class, and you say, okay, chat class, this is my configuration object, let's start. So, you know, 2 lines of code, it's really super easy, and you can start doing stuff with generative AI. LLPhant, again, as I was telling you before, the important thing is multi-vendor, meaning that we can connect to OpenAI, Anthropic, Mistral, and Olama. There's no official support for Grok with the Q, not the one with the K. And Grok is a very nice tool, but there's no official support, but the team is kind of working on it. I've seen a PR, which was updated like a couple of days ago, so very recent. Since Grok uses OpenAI protocol, OpenAI APIs, it should be compatible, but yeah. This thing, since the framework is growing quickly, everything is changing rapidly. And again, it's compatible with every OpenAI API system, meaning also local AI or other stuff that may come out at any time. Also, LLPhant is kind of feature-rich. It does a lot of stuff. It does obviously generate texts. It has support for streaming answers from language models, which streaming means that since the answers from a language model usually are a little bit slow, to have a stream, it means that the answers are coming little by little, and we can cycle on the stream and output this answer while it gets generated, which for some tasks, it's a really interesting feature. But then we have what's being called as tools or function calling, meaning that the models can decide, okay, this user wants an answer about something that can be asked to another system, like an an API or search on a database or whatever. And this is called function calling or tools. And some of the platforms also support tools. Some other, like Mistral, it's ongoing. Olama, which is a local language model system, let's say, it supports it, but it depends on the model. Obviously, Olama is very generic. It allows you to load a lot of different models. It's amazing, actually. We use it in production. But obviously, not all the models support function calling, so that depends. But also, there are some other interesting stuff. So images output or speech to text, which in this case are supported only by OpenAI, but it's because OpenAI, as far as I know, but again, things are changing like every week, so I may be missing something. OpenAI is the only one that gives us the API to do that. But it's not even exactly like that, because as you can see, since the first time that I did this talk, things are changed. And actually, for example, images input, it's now available both for Olama and OpenAI. Actually, I think I did the Olama one, the Olama-related PR. But yeah, things, again, this table will be filled pretty quickly for sure. So it's worth checking and following the project. So again, let's start going a little bit deeper. LLPhant, it's like, in my opinion, extremely easy. So here we have a lot of different code. I will guide you through all of it. The first line, let's say we want to ask a language model a direct question and get a simple answer, one shot or zero shot. So we just call the chat object that we've seen before and say, OK, generate text, and this is the question. What is 1.1? And the model will answer with one string, and that's it. That's the answer. It will take its time, whatever. That's the answer. Or if we want a stream, as we were saying before, we can directly call the generate stream of text, and same thing. But then, obviously, that's the super basic usage of everything language model related. But then we can say, OK, but what if we want to instruct the model doing stuff in a slightly different way? Not training, that's a whole another concept. But we can super easily say what is the system message, meaning that we are telling the language model how it should behave. And in this example, like the second part of the first block, we say, hey, chat, set this system message, which is whatever we ask, you must answer with OK. And just a kind of like a stupid system message, but it's just to show you. Then what happens is when we call the generate text to get an answer from the model will try to comply with the system message when answering. This is really useful. We will take a look at it in the live demo section later. Because most of the time, if we are creating a software based on generative AI, we have to try to limit the language models and instruct them on what kind of behavior we want them to have instead of just like general way. But then we have more interesting functions like the generate image or the audio transcribe function, which again, it's one line of code. And you can do like this really interesting stuff. With one line of code, you can translate transcribe the audio. Obviously, you have to be careful with the costs because, again, image generation and audio transcription, it's by OpenAI, so it costs you money. You have to be careful with that. And but yeah, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But then what else? Those are very basic one-shot things. But many times, if you will work in AI-related projects, many times it's going to be chatbots, meaning that users, like your customers, are asking the language model something, and they want to follow a conversation. How can you do that? Again, super easily with LLPhant. It's one method that's called generate chat. This generate chat method, what does it get? It gets like an array of all the messages that are part of the conversation. Every message has a different role. So we have the system messages we were seeing before. Then we have the first question of the user. In this case, what's the purpose of array map? Then the assistant, meaning the language model already answered before. And then we have a second question from the user here. Can you just provide an example? If we were like in a kind of like stupid system, the question, can you provide an example, wouldn't have any context, and whatever system was answering wouldn't be able to answer. But because we are sending to the language model all of the context of the conversation, the language model will know the context and will be able to provide an example related to whatever we were talking about before. So yeah, really powerful stuff. The way I use it, you probably will need to persist the messages that have been sent during a conversation. So what I super simply do is storing them into a database, retrieve them, send them to the language model. It's super simple again. But then we come to what I think it's probably the most useful part of this whole set of instruments, because if we are building a chatbot, I mean, the chatbot must be able to do something interesting relating to our customer. Because the thing is, we are never going to build a chatbot that's only generic, the way ChatGPT is, for example, because you already have ChatGPT. So here comes the tools or function calling that we were seeing before. And again, with LLPhant, it's extremely easy. So for sure, you will have a class or a set of classes that have your business logic in them. So for this example, it's a kind of stupid class mailer example with one single method that supposedly would send an email, but it wasn't important for the example itself. The way we tell the language model how to use that function is just by calling this function builder build function info. We pass to it an instance of the class, the name of the method we want to pass to the language model. And LLPhant, this function builder function is part of LLPhant. LLPhant will parse through PHP Reflections API, will parse the class and the method and extract all of the doc block, parameters, whatever, and prepare like a sort of metadata that will pass to OpenAI or Llama or whatever, in order for the language model to be able to decide if it should use this tool to answer the question from the user. So in this case, we have a system message and then a text, which is it's very low, sorry for that. Who is Marie Curie in one line, my email is whatever. And the language model is being able to process the query, understand that it should be calling the function. It will call the function. And then the third step will be reprocess the answer from the function, if there is one, and again send back a final answer to the user. OK, here comes the difficult part. So, like in my opinion, again, sorry for moving to the next slide too early, but in my opinion, function calling is like the most important thing that I was able to use for real customers, for a real-world usage. But then LLPhant doesn't stop here, meaning, I don't know if you heard about this concept of embedding. So language models are usually very generic. The language models that we can usually use are very generic. But we may need to add new stuff to a language model. So there's this concept of embedding. We have a couple of definitions. There's the right one, which is like embeddings are a set of vectors, which is a mathematical kind of concept, that are stored in an index, and the index lives in a vector database. It's kind of complicated because I didn't really study too much mathematics in university, but the wrong answer, but it's also kind of right. It's like, how do we add stuff to a language model? And we embed stuff into a language model. I I will publish the slides somewhere, but you can message me, you can find me very easily. So if you want to have these two links, they are very interesting links to understand how the concept of embedding works and also vectorialization. So I highly suggest, if you are interested in that, to read these two articles. And so, but what does vectorialization even mean? This image is pretty common. You can find it pretty easily on the web for sure. Maybe you found it already in some articles. And there is this thing which is like man is to king as woman is to queen. What does it even mean? But we see this chart, let's call it chart, and we see that there is a arrow, and vectors are kind of arrows in space. So there is, if we compute the vector, which is the arrow of the word king and the one of the word queen, the result, well, actually, sorry. If we compute the vector of king and man, the result is the red dotted arrow, which is kind of meaning royal as another resulting word. And if we do the same with other two words like queen and woman, we end up with a kind of similar vector, which is the same royal vector. And this is like, it's like, how is that even possible? I have not, like, this is like, to me, it's like magic, really. And this very wide image, it's a little bit better because it allows you to understand it a little bit better. So the thing is, if you calculate the vector of king minus the vector of man, the result is kind of the same of the vector of queen minus the vector of woman. And the same goes for kind of everything. So for example, Netherlands minus Amsterdam would be kind of similar to Rome minus Italy. And this is the way how everything works in language models. So you just browse through similarities of the vectors. And again, I'm like, I have no idea who came up with this concept, which is, like, to my simple developer mind, it's like unbelievable. We have a little bit of history. It's not something new. At the beginning, I thought, well, maybe somebody from OpenAI invented it, because yeah, they were the first one coming out with this ChatGPT thing, and it's not really far from being the truth, because the concept comes from the late 19th century. But it was used for mathematical and electromagnetic computations. But that's how the vectorialization system came out. And then the first language-applied vectorialization system comes from the 50s. And then it didn't really change much until, like, really recently, 2013, Google in 2018. So yeah, the last part is obviously very recent. But it was, I actually added this slide like in the past few days, because, I mean, these guys, yeah, I think it's worth knowing who they are, so yeah. So how does the process of embedding even work? It will be kind of simple in the technical terms, but we have to understand a few processes that are going on. So we have obviously a data reader, meaning that if we have some data we want the language model to be able to process, we need a data reader. So what are we doing next? We are splitting these documents into what's being called as chunks. So you want to have a size of a chunk that's meaningful for what kind of information you want to process. You don't want to have it too little or too big, because if it is too big, then the answer is like a little bit mixed up in many other stuff. And if it's too little, it doesn't provide enough context. So the thing is, the tricky part here, it's not even the technical side of things. It's not really like understanding what kind of PHP lines are we writing, but it's more like a data science kind of problematic that we will have to test with trial and error. So what are we doing after we decided how we're going to split the document? We will format these chunks, because maybe we want to enrich the data in a certain way before passing it to the language model. Then we have what's been called as embedding generator, which really crunches the numbers, calculates the vectors, and then what happens, it's been stored in the vector store. I don't know why in this image there's a PostgreSQL icon, but yeah, PostgreSQL is one of the possible vector store for storing this kind of data. So I thought I had another slide. OK, doesn't matter. Anyway, how do we do this set of process? Again, it seems difficult, but it's kind of easy. It's just a little bit longer compared to the code that we were seeing before. So we just instantiate our data reader, read the document. Then again, we split the document. We see this 500 number there, meaning those are characters. So you can decide, again, how big of a chunk you want to extract from the document. And then you just call, in this case, OpenAI embedding generator. You embed the stuff. You decide which memory, which vector store you want to use. In this case, we have memory vector store, meaning that everything will be stored in RAM. And then, now I want to use these things that I want to add to the language model, and I want to use it asking questions on those things. And the way we do it, we have this question answering class. We pass all of the above, and it will answer the question like so. Yeah, it seems a little bit like complicated since there's quite a lot of stuff going on in this screen, but it's really straightforward. And yeah, this was the slide that I was talking about. These are the supported vector stores. So there's one for every different taste, depending on, every tool has a different set of features. And also depending on your infrastructure, you may want to use one or the other. But yeah, you can use a lot of them, so no problem there. So here comes the question. Should I use embedding something into the language model or use function calling? Because they seem kind of to do kind of the same thing in a way. And for me, the main difference is depending on how fixed in time your data is. What do I mean by that? If your data never changes, or it changes like every once in a while, like for example, documents, meaning we want to process laws or regulations of our company. And these regulations, we have a set of, PDF documents. They change once per year or never, In this case, go for embeddings. It's the best way to add this knowledge to a language model. But on the other side of the coin, if we need to query an API system about data that changes constantly, for example, in my use case, the customer that I was building this tool for, this project for, is an insurance company. They want to query data on the insurance claims, and the insurance claims change like every day. So embeddings wouldn't be working at all, as far for my knowledge. So in this case, we have to use function calling in this 3 steps process, like processing the query from the user, calling the API, and processing, again, the answers from the API through the language model to be able to answer the user question. Then we have, I think it's probably the last feature of LLPhant, which is AutoPHP, which is inspired by AutoGPT, I think it was the name. It's because everybody now is interested in agentic approach. Agentic approach meaning we have different AI-based, agents, so entities that are working towards a common goal. And there's at least one agent that checks on the work of the other agents and decide if the original answer, if the original question is answered completely, and then stops the process. So with AutoPHP, part of LLPhant, you can do that, and it's a little bit a simpler approach compared to other frameworks, but it works. So you can just create the tool, again, that you want to use to reach a certain goal, and then you will tell, OK, LLPhant, we have this objective, and we have this function, and try to solve it in less than, in this case, 10 iterations. Why there is this limit? This limit is super important because if the agents go a little bit out of control, because at a certain point they kind of work on their own, and since they have to decide if it's finished or not, it can go, if it goes wrong, it can go into an infinite loop. We don't want that, also because of costs. So we decide, okay, after 10 runs, it's finished. What happened, it's finished. So this is a way for you to limit costs. I never used the agentic approach in my work because it tends to become slower. And when we are dealing with language models, it's already a slow process. So if we add on top of that we have multiple AI bots doing stuff, again, there are cases where this is very useful, but there are cases like mine that I couldn't allow for the system to be slower than what it is. And so, yeah, for me, there's this possibility, but I didn't use it. But again, the framework being general, it allows you for doing a lot of stuff. So, yeah, usually what happens with AI, it seems like, yeah, okay, but if we want to use it for real-world stuff, and the answer every time kind of changes, they're not super reliable, then does it really work in a, let's say, in a production environment, in a production process? So let's try to have a little bit of a demo. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I created a super small repository there. If you want to play around with this set of things we will take a look at. It's super simple, and yeah, it's available for everybody there. Let's see. So let's start from the first demo. It's like just simply asking a straight question to a model, and you see this is the whole code that's needed. It's like really like nothing, And let's see it working. And I will tell you already. Yeah, we have it there. PHP 01. Okay, I will tell you before. This one will fail, but there's a reason for that. It fails. It successfully failed. There's a reason for that. I didn't start. This demo is all local. It's not internet-based. I think it's interesting to use Ollama for this, to have local AI stuff. Why is that? Because there are customers that you may work with, like the case that I was working for, that have sensitive data, and they cannot allow data to go outside of their company. So for example, insurance company, we're dealing with medical stuff, sometimes even stuff that's part of a court system. So you cannot really allow, and also if we don't think, OpenAI is gonna take our data and do weird stuff, it's not about that, but legally they cannot allow data to go outside. So yeah, I wanted to show you this demo using a local AI. So let's start Ollama with Ollama Serve. And this way you will also understand how slow the system is. It's running on my computer, which is it's a modern MacBook, but it's nothing like crazy, It has 16 gigs of RAM. It's not like a €1 million computer. So we started Ollama. So let's run the first demo again and see how long it takes. So first of all, we started Ollama, but Ollama doesn't know what language model I want to use. So it will have to load the model later. And it will happen when I press Enter, which is this one. So let's see. It's going to take a few seconds. It didn't even take very long, but it loaded the model. In this case, what we used is Llama 3.18 billion, which is like about 5 gigabytes in size. So it loaded into the memory and then processes the answer. And it wasn't even that slow. So the question was, what's the secret of life in 10 words? And love, kindness, acceptance, whatever. So yeah, it kind of worked. But let's go into more interesting stuff. which is like, again, we were seeing before, let's use a system message where whatever we ask you, you must answer with OK. Again, stupid system message, but the thing we want to try to see if that, also if we are asking a completely random question to the model, we want the model not to think on its own, but just do what we want, which is, because in most of the cases, we need that when we are working, again, with customers. Like, for example, if I am processing insurance data, I cannot allow my bot to answer, like, write me a poem in Spanish or whatever, you know? We don't want that. We don't want to build a replacement for ChatGPT. So that's why we need to be able to understand if the model can be restricted some way. So we are asking, what is 1 plus 1? The answer would be 2, but we expect it to answer with OK. Let's see if it works. OK, so it worked. So it seems like it's pretty reliable until now. And Llama 3.1 is a very good model. I like it a lot. In production, we use Mistral, the open source Mistral model, not the Mistral, the cloud version, because in my experience, the function calling of the Mistral model, it's been amazing. Kind of like on par with the SaaS services like ChatGPT, while Llama tends to make mistakes when it has to fill parameters of functions and this kind of stuff. So yeah. So this was the second demo. Let's see the third demo, which is again related to the system message. Because, for example, for my use case, I needed the bot to answer always in a specific language, which it may happen to you while working with chatbots. And again, we ask the same question, but also if it's answered, also if it is asked in English, we want a Spanish answer. So let's see if this works. 03, 2 más 2 igual 4. So this shows that, again, the system message works, and you can also do multi-language stuff depending on what languages are supported by the models. But yeah, again, we got a rough idea of that. And what else? OK, let's see. Let's go for the chat. Again, as we were seeing before, we need chat because we are always conversating with the bot, and we need the bot to have a context. And yeah, again, we saw it before. So in this case, we are just instructed the model of, like, you are a helpful assistant, like kind of generic. And the user is asking what day will tomorrow be. And the assistant is answering, tomorrow is 25 December 2030. We fabricated this answer. So yeah, let's just take it as if it is correct in this case. And the user is asking, so today is, and let's see how the model behaves in this specific case. This is the answer for. It tells us this today is 24 December 2030, which makes sense because if tomorrow is 25 December of 2030, again, this shows that we can make the model adhere to the context and the system messages, so we can kind of really do production-ready stuff because it doesn't really behave so erratically, let's say. So, and then let's come to see tools. We have a function here. You can check the repository later. Actually, we have two functions. And we have a question here that's like, what's Fabrizio email address? And the email address, we can get it from here. This is get user data by the name of the person. Again, kind of silly examples, but yeah, this is like a demo. So let's see 05. It obviously will take a little bit longer, but it tells us that Fabrizio email address is example, which, as we can see, the get user data, it was returning a JSON object with our email address there. So the language model was able to extract that, actually